Howdy, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of Rednecks Rising, your favorite podcast. It's bustin' mids about Appalachia and the hell-raising hillbillies that call this place their home. Today's episode is an interview with one of our friends from the Chattanooga Free Store, but before we dig into that, we have a couple of housekeeping items to take care of. First, I want to give a shout out to Bristol Traveler, the latest member of our crew on the Rednecks Rising team over on our Ko-Fi page. Thank you so much for your financial support and also just your energetic and emotional support on social media. You've been really awesome and we super appreciate you. For those who are interested or curious, this is an independently produced podcast, which means that I have no big financial backers or production companies supporting this work. I am not independently wealthy, and I fully intend to keep it that way on both means. I work a full-time day job. I'm a working class mom of a toddler, and I record this podcast from the computer that I also use for my day job out of my home office in my bedroom in Western North Carolina. And it isn't free to produce a podcast. The publishing platform costs around $8 per month on the current plan that I have. And a publishing platform is essentially what publishes and distributes the episodes to all of the podcast platforms that y'all listen on, like Spotify and Apple and so on. And I recently heard feedback that apparently one of our listeners heard an ad for the CIA on one of our episodes. So that's really great. We love how aligned that is with the podcast. And in case you didn't pick up on that because you can't see my body language, that was sarcasm. So that said, in order to customize the ads that, the categories of ads that appear on these episodes, I'm going to have to upgrade to a little different plan that's somewhat more expensive, but all that said, this is a little bit of a tangent at this point. You can help support the podcast financially or even emotionally if you aren't in a place to provide financial support given the dramatic rise in the cost of living and all that stuff, which I totally understand. Regardless, you can head over to our Ko-Fi page, whether you have $0 or $10 to contribute. And a Ko-Fi page is kind of like a Patreon. That's spelled K-O, like knockout, hyphen, fi.com/rednecksrising. No spaces, nothing, no hyphens or any special characters in the Rednecks Rising portion. Over there, you can give our page a follow at no cost to you and just keep up to date with internal happenings on the podcast, big announcements, that kind of thing. You can also find our merch shop over there if that's your thing. You can throw a one-time contribution our way, like a tip, or you can become a monthly subscriber to help us keep this show not just surviving, but thriving. Anyways, every month we will be contributing half of the overall profit from the show to an Appalachian organization. And if you're a monthly contributor, you might just get to vote on what that organization is in coming months. But since we launched mid-June, we are taking all of the profit since the launch until the end of July, and we're donating all of that 6-week period towards the Pulaski County Free Store, which is in Southwest Virginia, and we interviewed them in our second episode. So if you didn't listen to that episode, please go check it out. All right, I think that wraps us up on housekeeping stuff, which brings us to our trivia question of the day with Christopher. All right, what you got for us today?
Hey, Chelsea. Hey, everyone. So for this week's question, first I want to start out by saying last week I was corrected by a few of you.
You were corrected. Everybody was super nice about it, but there were more than a couple of folks who were hopping in the Rednecks Rising DMs to let us know that this was not their understanding.
That said that Pittsburgh is actually the largest city in Appalachia, and you are correct. I'm sorry, I guess with the nervousness of doing this for the first time, I wrote it down as Southern Appalachia, but I don't know. This is new. I'm just trying to iron out the kinks, so just bear with me if you don't
no
mind.
worries.
So.
I still get nervous every time I record, and I know that our listeners totally understand and just appreciate the fun facts that you're dropping on us. And besides, now we know Chattanooga is the largest city in southern Appalachia, and the largest city in Appalachia at large is Pittsburgh. We love crowdsourcing knowledge around here, so thanks to everyone who raised this flag for us. And with that out of the way, what do you got for us this week?
For this week's question, I need you to finish the sentence. While Appalachia is known for being home to many unique animals in this region, it is known for being the blank capital of the world.
All right, folks. So when it comes to animals, the question is, Appalachia is known for being the what capital of the world? What animal? Stay tuned and you'll hear the answer at the end of this episode. I can kick us off with like a quick podcast
intro, cool.
For the sound. Howdy, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of Rednecks Rising, your favorite podcast all about the evolution of revolution and redneck history. Today, I'm excited to be sitting down with my friend Cody from the Chattanooga Free Store. We talked to a free store organizer from Virginia a couple episodes back, and we're excited to talk more about the mutual aid efforts across the Appalachian region and what those look like. Before we jump into all of those details, I'm sure the listeners would love to know a little bit more about you, Cody. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So my name is Cody, pronouns he, him. I'm part of the coalition that kind of organizes everything that goes on in the free store, the Chattanooga Free Store. And I mostly focus on kind of outreach and a little bit of fundraising as well. That's kind of my wheelhouse. And then we have other coalition members that fall under different kind of categories within the free store, upkeep, and those type of things, like volunteer, organization, and just different things. So
that's awesome.
Yes.
Were you part of the coalition that helped to start this free store from the beginning?
So there was a group of 3 folks that kind of started it. And then when I moved to Chattanooga about 2 years ago, the first thing I did was start looking for leftist orgs to get involved with. My first venture was DSA, and they don't do anything in Chattanooga. So I was like, this isn't revolutionary enough for me. And so I found the free store and was hesitant at first, COVID was going on. I didn't know what was going on. And then finally, I just reached out and was like, hey, I want to be involved. And so I'd say I was probably one of the first steady volunteers. And then it just momentum started building, and we needed to have not that we have a hierarchical system, but just a coalition that kind of heads up what we're going to do, what we do, and just to take, I guess, control of the initiatives that we do. But it was started by 3 trans folks here in Chattanooga, and they essentially started it by going to the homeless camp that's here in Chattanooga and just asking the homeless folks, what do y'all need? It was a lot of just water, toothpaste, things like that. And so and fresh vegetables and fruits. So they went and rounded up the most stuff that they could, took it there. And then from that, we kind of found a need more for lower income families, not so much the homeless here in Chattanooga. There's a lot, not that we're being you can't, if you're homeless, you can't come to the free store, but it's there's a lot of orgs already in Chattanooga that kind of focus on that demographic. And so the free store I've had to say our demographic for people that we service is, lower income families. And so they started doing pop-ups in this park that's here in Chattanooga. And they would do it every Saturday. So we didn't even have a physical space yet. It would just be, we would do the pop-up every other Saturday. Folks would come and get stuff. And then we finally got to a point where we had enough Patreon subscribers and enough money coming in for us to start looking for a physical space to pay rent, to pay bills, etc. And so we just opened our physical space beginning of the year. And that's been all of that kind of happened in 9 months. Yeah. So, and then, so we have the physical space now, and kind of our goal, let me know if I'm just rambling at any point. Okay. Our goal is kind of to have a space for a safe space for trans folks. And then, eventually when it gets colder, we're going to have a warming space for homeless people, or houseless people. and then also have different types of community events in the space. Like I think we're trying to work on like a Stop the Bleed class, and some other stuff. I think that's not my side of it, that organization part of it, but I know there's just like, we have plans of doing different things inside the space, because we are already paying for the space and we're not open every day currently. So if we can get other people in here that need a space to do stuff, then obviously we want to be able to provide that space. So.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's so much snowballed in 9 months. That's really amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure it's like the free store it's about a year old now, as far as the idea of it. The folks that started it, like, they're anarchists, and so they were like, let's do some mutual aid stuff. So I myself am not, but they all are.
Hey, part of what I personally love doing is bringing leftists together across the different individual ideologies, because I really do think that it takes all of us. Like, there's this one framework from a climate coalition here in North Carolina that refers to 4 R's of the movement. And each of the R's are resist, reform, reimagine, and recreate. And the idea of the framework is that it takes all 4 in order to actually transform society, and that not everyone is good at all 4 of those, right? Like, some people are really great at resistance and taking a rest and getting tear gassed, and that's just their jam. And other people are good at reforming and working in the system, and other people are good at reimagining and recreating spaces that are safe for the most vulnerable folks, like what y'all are doing.
Sure.
So, So yeah, I love that you're able to fit into that space. Even.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, we don't even really, to be honest with you, we don't even really talk political stuff that often. But I guess my thing is I just got tired of stupid ass internet leftist bullshit. Like, if you're spending time doing all that shit, talking shit to each other because somebody's an ML, somebody's a Maoist, somebody's a anarcho, whatever, you could be doing some shit in your community. If you got time to do that, you probably got time to go at least, I don't know, help a leftist or do paperwork, help them grant write. If you can write some long fucking speech about anarchy and all this other shit, then you can probably, sorry, can I cuss? Because I cuss a lot.
Oh, fuck yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I guess because when I start getting heated, I'm just dropping F-bombs. But I'm
love it.
if you got the fucking time to write these long ass things about how Lenin was wrong or Mao was wrong or whoever the fuck you got beef with, some dead motherfucker, then you got time to do something. I don't know. That's just, and I'm not trying to be ableist, but it's if you can sit here and type out some long ass explanation about, I don't know, and argue back and forth on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or whatever with somebody that's also a leftist, you got time to be, like I said, grant writing, doing something else that you could be doing with an organization. If not, then just shut up, shit or get off the pot. That's kind of the mentality that I take. So, I don't really, that's why I'm I don't have beef with the folks. Everybody is pretty much everybody but me. Well, we have some liberals in our organization too, but as far as political ideology, it's me, which I'm a Marxist Leninist, and then some anarchists too.
Oh yeah, I love just the way that you said all of that, and exactly, shit or get off the pot. Exactly. I personally don't even know a lot of theory. I literally don't read theory. All of my background is in human behavior. So my background is in social work, human behavior, but not social work, foster care, social work, community organizing, social work, and social policy stuff. But so I literally could not tell you, what ideology I fall into, but I've been organizing in Appalachian, Western North Carolina, which is where I'm from, for a decade now. And that organizing comes from just a recognition of there's a fuck ton of propaganda and psyops that are happening right now. And my people who raised me with values that are rooted in interconnected survival and love for each other and acceptance, the same people who raised me with those values are now regurgitating hateful
right
government,
Yep.
So it's just like, that's where my organizing comes from. It's like, I don't give a shit, like, about any of like the theory, unless the theory results in like healing from all of the trauma that we're going through, like,
for sure.
So yeah,
I always take that reminds me of I don't know if you're familiar with it. I think his name's Bill Haywood. I don't know if you're familiar with Bill Haywood. He was like one of the first like IWW people, but he has a quote that said, "I've never read Marx's Capital, but I have the marks of capital all over my body." It's like a really good quote. Like, you don't have to read theory. Like, I'm not trying to be like, if you don't read theory, then fuck off. But I think it's crucial to help you like learn things, like how to do stuff. But again, I don't think you have to. I think, especially in Appalachia and the South, like I grew up in poverty. Like, I know what it looks like. You don't have to tell me like how capitalism works. I fucking lived it for 31 years. Like, I know how it works. It doesn't help us. Like,
exactly.
So it's just, I don't think that theory, like, that's on the hill I'm going to die on, but I also think you have to be wary of like liberal ideology seeping into your leftist organizations, because that focus on the individual and stuff like that can lead to just like ego shit and people fucking up an organization. So that's kind of, I guess, where I take my approach to it. A little bit of Maoism in there, but
Love that. Yeah, I'm totally down to hear other people like explain theory to me and like get their take, but I just don't. I'm like, my ADHD will not let me sit through and read.
Oh, I mean, like, dude, like a fucking year and a half ago, like I had like knockdown, drag out arguments with the person that radicalized me about shit, and he was just be like, "Well, just fucking read it then if you think you got to figure it out." And then like I was like, "All right, I'm gonna read Marx's Capital." I didn't read it, but I listened to it like audiobook, and then I was like, holy fuck, dude. Like, that shit just like changed my whole thing. It's like, he literally broke it down of how like unfettered capitalism is not possible without like ruining people's lives and the planet. Like, if like when you boil it down, is like, it doesn't benefit any of us. It benefits a small few. So yeah, not to derail, like we're supposed to be talking about the free store, but
no,
yeah,
I love it. It should be intersecting. It's all connected. I mean, like, why we do what we do. Me and Heather also say like the personal is political, like everything. And yeah, I'm totally like, when I say I don't read theory, what I mean is like, I absolutely am like anti-capitalist and like anti-racist. However, I'm not necessarily tied to the means by which we achieve a society that is like free of those oppressive systems.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
So, and I think like what y'all are doing at the free store is like especially effective in Appalachia, because, when it comes to like theory and like talking and like trying to explain why things work, it's like, I feel like our neighbors just do not have time for that shit. But if you can show them, like if you can put it into practice and be like, this is what it looks like when we take care of each other, then they pay attention. And that's like what y'all are doing.
Well, I mean, that's part of the system, right? Is like the working class doesn't have time to learn these things. It's like up to people to like myself that I have a little bit more privileged lifestyle now, and I can go and do things. And I mean, post agitation propaganda that's like, hey, I know you're being fed, CNN and MSNBC and Fox News bullshit, but like, hey, have you ever thought about it this way? And it's like, oh, like for example, I was talking to my brother-in-law the other day, and he's definitely like, I wouldn't say right wing, but former military, voted for Trump because he wasn't Hillary, like a little bit anti-COVID vaccine stuff. But we were just like talking one day, and I was like, he was like talking about Social Security, and I was like, bro, like you're literally telling me you're going to retire on Social Security. And he's like, yeah. And like, it obviously is like army shit too. But I was like, you know what that first word is? Like social security, like socialism. And he was just like, his fucking head exploded, because like he never like analyzed that shit and been like, oh, like this is literally a system that we all pay into to help people that can't work, like ideally, except for, the oligarchs have essentially fucked the whole system up. But I think that's like an approach that you have to take. I know I see a lot of like quote unquote redneck hate, or like hillbillies and shit like that, especially whenever you get to like I don't know, like outside of rural areas and metropolitan areas, like, oh, this is a bunch of dumb fucking rednecks. But I'm like, if you're a leftist, you're going to need those dumb fucking rednecks. Like, you can't just write them off. Like, those people understand the problem. They're just jaded and they're just confused and they're afraid. Like,
and they're literally victims of like very fucking intentional tactics at the hands of people in power. Like, our local, like when I try to explain to people like why, I mean, Western North Carolina. So I live in Madison Cawthorn's congressional district. If that tells you,
I lived in Marjorie Taylor Greene's district, so you ain't got to tell me shit.
And I'm pretty
sure I was like the first person to fucking troll her like ever. She came to my hometown and went to this Hispanic restaurant or this Mexican restaurant, and like she didn't book it. She just showed up with like all her little crew or whatever. And they were like, you can't eat here. And then she like pitched a fit. So I made this meme that was like, when you want to build the wall, but the Mexican restaurant won't let you eat at it, and like posted it on her like Facebook page. She blocked me while she was running. I could not post on any of her, like I couldn't comment on any of her like stuff when she was running for candidacy, because once she becomes a candidate, she can't do that for people that are her constituents. But before she blocked me on shit. And like, I would just troll the shit out of her. I made these like, because she wasn't from our district. She was from like North Atlanta. That she moved up, or she rented a apartment or some shit in Rome, which is like where our like the heart of centrally of the district. And I made her signs that was like, it was like Marjorie Taylor Greene something for Congress. And so I just like took them and made them say Marjorie Taylor Greene carpetbagger for Congress. And because she wasn't from there, and like people will like reshare that shit. Like, so I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to derail you on what you were talking about, but yeah, I know some crazies. So
goals. Yeah, but so what was the point of, so what I was trying to say is so when I try to explain to folks, like, so Western North Carolina, my congressional district, we have 17 counties in this congressional district that are about 5 hours of driving distance from the farthest east to the farthest west. And there's 14 out of those 17 in the primary election of 2016, 14 counties voted for Bernie, but almost all of our delegates ended up going to Hillary Clinton. And then the whole fucking district went red for Trump. And like, I try to explain to people when they're like, oh, well, they just like, they vote against their own self-interest. Why are they like this? I'm like, it's not an accident that this shit happens. Like, our schools have been so fucking defunded out here that like critical thinking is not a skill we are learning. Then on top of that, it's like Sinclair fucking Media owns all of our local news. We barely have access to broadband if we're lucky. Like, if you live close enough to Asheville, you can get good enough broadband, but anybody else and you're shit out of luck. And like and then, you know, Sinclair Media is like literally pumping fucking propaganda into the community. And you've got like trauma from people just trying to survive. And then people want to act like it's their own it's like, it's the same kind of rhetoric that people like would hate someone to say about an addict, right? Saying like, oh, well, they just keep choosing this lifestyle. And it's like, why is it so hard to understand?
Right. Well, that's why I kind of mentioned it earlier with, I recently read Combat Liberalism by Mao. And so it's like fresh in my head. But like, if I see a leftist or hear a leftist say something about like, you know, like fuck Trumpers or fuck, you know, rednecks and hillbillies and shit, I'm like, dude, that's just liberal. Like, you're letting liberal ideology seep into your leftist like praxis. Like when every successful socialist revolution, if you want to be upset about the Bolsheviks or the peasants in China or whoever, like, you can have your own vendettas, but those are working class people. And guess who are working class people in the South? Those fucking rednecks that you're all like, everybody talks shit about and thinks that are, like I said, they're jaded, they're uninformed, and I think fear plays a lot of it into a lot of it. Like, for where I grew up, there's a bigger Hispanic population just because we're near Dalton, which is like the carpet capital of the world. I don't know if it still is, but it was. And so there's a lot of manufacturing up there. And so there's like as a decent sized Hispanic community. There's not a lot of African-American people, and it's mostly just white people. And then anybody that fell on any type of spectrum outside of being a cishet person was like, you know, like I didn't start meeting trans folks till I moved to Chattanooga. You know, and it's just like they never meet anybody, you know, and it's kind of like the same thing with like, I've started telling my family members like I'm a communist, and they're like, what the fuck, you know, and it's like you have to put a face to those things, because if you don't, you're just the other. Like you're just the other. Like those things are always just the other. And you know, it's a lot of, well, they do this and they do that and thems and that, and it's like, well, who's they? Like not using they as a pronoun, but like who is they? Like who's they that you're talking about? You know, well, the Democrats are communists. Like, no, they're not. Like, trust me, they're definitely not. They're neoliberals as fuck. Like, they're not communists. But yeah, and then like, I mean, kind of like what y'all's podcast is. It's like the history is just not. I mean, it's not there. All we learn about is, sorry, there's like somebody mowing grass or something. Like all we learn about are like, you know, colonialism, genocide of indigenous people, fucking slavery. Like, you know, you don't hear about worker uprisings at all. You know, and just I think it's important that we have those things accessible, especially like podcast form, where people can just turn it on while they're working their fucking 9 to 5 or whatever shit job they have in a warehouse or whatever, and can try to learn stuff.
Yeah, and where they're learning it from folks that they feel like they can relate to, and like people that are a part of their community, and that it's not some like Californian trying to like, you know, brainwash them.
Yeah. Well, the thing that we have here in Chattanooga is like the conservative Californians are moving here, and then they get here and they're like, oh shit, y'all are like y'all want some different level of conservative shit. And I'm like, yeah. Like y'all thought that all conservatives were like, oh no, I'm socially liberal and like economically conservative. Like, nah, you come down here and it's not the same thing, dude. Like,
but now you know what you've been associating yourself with.
Right. Yeah, so sorry, I feel like I've just done political rants the whole time. Do you want to shift gears more?
Sure.
No, you had mentioned earlier, like I guess where I came from. I feel like I've kind of talked about that a little bit, like how I got to where I am. So did you want me to talk about that? Is that fine with you?
Sure. Yeah. I especially
Okay.
like the idea of, you know, since we've touched on like people have these stereotypes against like stupid hillbillies, like, and I think especially like people think about Appalachia and the South, and they're like every working class, like blue collar white person in that area is a racist piece of shit. Like that's the first thing that comes to mind. And so like one thing that I'd just be really curious to hear about is like, how did you make your journey to leftism,
I guess, or leftist ideology.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I grew up a chicken farmer's son. Prior to that, my parents were both working in warehouses. My mom worked in a carpet mill. My dad worked in a steel factory. And then got to a point where he could, I don't know if you're that familiar with chicken farming at all, but like we had industrial sized chicken houses. Did that for a while, and he kind of learned that I was not cut from that same cloth. Like that was not me. And so, yeah, I mean, my hometown doesn't have a single stoplight. It's just 2 stop signs, super small town. Everybody knows everybody. Half the fucking town is my cousins to some degree. There's literally a mountain that all my family lives on. My mom's side of the family, they call Townsend Mountain because like all of them live up there. So super rural area in North Georgia. What got me into this was a little bit of punk rock and a little bit of rebellion from my parents and everyone always talking about how bad communism was and how bad these things were. So one day I like snuck at a Barnes and Noble and bought the Communist Manifesto and read it at like 16 and was like, I don't know what this P word means and I don't know what this B word is. I don't know how to say these words like proletariat and bourgeois, but I was like, the P words are me. Like I know what the P word is, and the B words are like the people that my dad talks about, like rich people. You know, it's like it was pretty clear for me to pick up on that. And then from there, I kind of was like, I wouldn't call myself a communist at that point. I was definitely like I'm a socialist. And that was before Bernie. And then like Bernie came around, and I was like, is this dude really saying the S word right now? Like I would just like have conversations with people and be like, I'm a socialist, and they're like, you know, like people didn't know what that was. And then Bernie comes around and, you know, obviously he has always been there, but like he just became propelled to like the national stage. And then once I graduated college, I took a really hard turn. I think I just got like liberalism stuck in my head. And this, like, I was 20, kind of confused about what I was doing in my life, angry, not knowing what was going on. So I like went hard into like libertarianism, where it was like strong survive, fuck you if you don't make it, like it's your own fucking fault. You know, but also not much, not like a, I don't know. I think that's where, you know, we lose, especially because I'm a cishet white man, like in the South. So I understand where all of them come from. Like I know, you know, and I think it's just some of it is exposure. But nonetheless, my friend that radicalized me, we would have these conversations, and like I would be like, yeah, dude, like, I agree with most of this, but like the system is fucked. Like you're being like, you want this government to be the ones running things? And he's like, no, 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 no. And then I'm like, okay. And then that was pretty much when he was like, you should just read it, because I'm very open-minded. I'm like, yeah, I mean, I'll check it out. I'm not open-minded anymore. If it stinks of liberalism, I'm out. But yeah, so I just like read or listened to, I don't know if you're familiar with the podcast Mark's Madness.
Ooh, no, but I'll check it
but
out.
That was what, I mean, that helped radicalize me. They did their first season is all Das Kapital. They take every episode and break down like a chapter essentially, or like a section, and then they kind of leave out all the parts where Marx is like the wool and then the spindle, like the fucking math that he did essentially to like make Ricardo and Smith look like a bunch of fucking idiots. Like they take that out and they just kind of like break down like what he's talking about. These are the things like, and so that was kind of what that helped radicalize me. And then yeah, ever since I've just been like, how do I get involved? How do I make these things that I read about and stuff like work? Because kind of harken back to what you said is like, I mean, I grew up in the church. I'm not a Christian anymore, but like I grew up in the church, and all the things that you told me in the church that how I'm supposed to live my life, they line up exactly with all the stuff that I'm reading about that you told me was bad. And then you don't look at how capitalism is like literally violent, like one of the most violent systems in the fucking world. Like even if you don't want to say that it's like, well, it's not that violent. I mean, outside of the just like genocide and, you know, American imperialism and everything else, like forcing people that can't physically work or neurodivergent people to work in a system to be a certain, like you have to be a certain way, like that's violence. Like, you know, forcing people to have to work to have a home, like that's violent. Like you're literally like, if you don't do these things, you could be homeless. Like that's a violent system. It's just prolonged violence, you know, not to like jump on the bandwagon of like what the current national topic is, but like gun violence, like it's like a gunshot is like in your face, blatantly violent. It's the long, slow, like, you know, not having access to healthcare, but you're working fucking 60 hours a week trying to just pay the bills. Like that's fucking violent. Like why are we as a society not able, like we are able to do all these things, like provide housing for fucking everybody, you know, but the system that we live under has to have the scarcity, like it has to force scarcity upon us. Yeah, not to again derail on stuff.
No. I so appreciate bringing that up, because like one of the things that came to mind as you were talking about like the prolonged violence of capitalism is that, like, you know, and I have thought about how violent capitalism is, but I've never thought about it as like in that language. And it's when we think about how like death by gun in some situations is even seen as like merciful when compared to a death that's like prolonged in the way that capitalism prolongs death. Like I think about, we used to have this Walker hound that had 3 legs, and the reason it had 3 legs is because it had been shot by one of our neighbors, and like there was a whole, you know, Appalachian thing. Yep. And so, but he lived a long life after we had that 1 leg amputated, but then he got to a point where he was in pain constantly because that leg that he was dependent on was like,
too much work,
I
essentially.
guess.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And so we had to make a choice to put him down, and like, how do you put down a dog
Right.
in the
In
South?
Appalachia, right?
Yeah, and it's like, and so when we compare capitalism to gun violence the way that you just did, it's just like, wow, you can really see how, like, in some ways, actually, like, violence in the form of that, like, clear, blatant violence is actually less violent than that, like, prolonged, painful, like, undignified death via
I mean, like, you probably have this, and I'm not saying, like, especially I guess it's everywhere, but like we had like a small grocery store, and it was like everybody that worked there was like quote unquote retirees, and it's like they're not retired, like they're old enough to draw like Social Security or something like that, or Medicaid and get Medicare and Medicaid. But and again, that's another thing, is like that person would probably vote for Trump and 100 times over any Democrat, just because the Democrats are, cabal, whatever, pedo, adrenochrome drinking, whatever shit that is out there. But they're literally using what little quote unquote socialist programs that we have in America. Like, that's how they survive, but I don't think anybody ever breaks it down. I mean, like, growing up, I remember, like, that's what you retired with. You retired with Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. Like, talking about like 401k, the fuck is that? Like, for a Roth IRA, what the fuck is that? I didn't know what that shit was until I got like a corporate job, and it's like, talking to, I mean, like, those same people, they're, like I said, hardcore Trump supporters, because he's different. He's not the same, but it's like, actually, he is different. Yes. He says the silent parts out loud half the time. Joe Biden does too, but like, they, again, I think it is they do vote in their against their own interests, I guess. But even like you were talking about with your dog, like, how many people do you know that have, bad knees or something, like bone spurs, and have to work on a factory floor walking on cement, and shoes for 10 hours a day or some shit, making stuff that they can't even fucking afford, like, that's how I grew up. I mean, like, I worked in a factory for a little while one summer. Essentially, I got a DUI and had to pay for it, so I had to get like a summer job. But like, I worked in a factory that made like not marble, but like all the like bougie countertops, and like my family couldn't afford that shit, but like to pay for the stuff that we made, and it's like, you're making commodities that you can't even afford. Like, I don't know, does that not make you start questioning this shit? Where it's like, especially somebody working at McDonald's is like, they work for 1 hour and can't even afford like the meal that somebody just ordered. Like, if somebody ordered a $10 meal, they can't even afford that from hours worth of labor. Like, does nobody else see that that's kind of a fucking problem? Like, so yeah, I don't know why I got on that, but
yeah, well, I mean, and going back to like what you were saying about like, the folks here depending on like the bare minimum of social programs that we do offer in this country. Right. But even considering like what those social programs offer is still like violent in the inadequacy of like what it forces the conditions that it forces people to live in. Like I think about my grandma who, my grandpa passed away very early. So she got his Social Security, and she's still, with their combined Social Securities, like living in a single wide trailer that's like, she barely gets enough food stamps to like survive on. And like, it's not what people would look at and call a dignified life, like, exactly. Or even comfortable by most means. Like, and so it's just like, but then I think that's what, like, that's part of like the plan, right? Like, if they make social programs look horrible and inadequate and like, and then it plays into this idea that like, it doesn't work when we try to take care of each other because we can't afford it, and people take advantage of what do they take it? There's nothing there to take advantage of.
Well, I would take, like, usually when I have that conversation with someone, pretty like Mark's had a like a word like the lumpen proletariat, which were essentially, people that were below, like he wasn't using it as a derogatory, but like people below the working class that, can't like afford to do any, like, what some as Republicans would call welfare queens and stuff like that, like dog whistling shit that they say. But like, trust me, I'd rather have 1,500 or a bajillion fucking what do you want to call leeches on the right side than the actual leeches that are capitalists. Like, like no one's taking advantage. Like, yeah, they're taking advantage of it because they don't have access to other resources. Like, I don't know. That's why I feel like that's one of the sticking points that some people try to be like, gotcha. And I'm like, actually, no, like, I'm not worried about those people. I would rather have people that are quote unquote living off the system or whatever, then I would rather have a ton of more of those and then other people be taken care of, like it doesn't, I don't know. That's just my own thing, I guess. But
yeah, like I would sleep a lot easier at night if I knew that there weren't people going hungry right. all around right. me. And that right. corporations were like, even if they were taking advantage, if they weren't hungry, like honestly, them taking advantage would not keep me awake at night at all in the slightest.
For sure. So, I guess that was, I guess, sort of my backstory. And then I moved to Chattanooga about 2 years ago, got involved with the Free Store not as soon as, but it felt, the Free Store felt more to me what I needed to be doing than any of the political organizations that were here in town, which we only really have DSA. There is a very small IWW chapter here that I was kind of a part of. And then I was like, the dues that I'm paying to IWW, I could just switch to the Free Store and we would have more income, because I don't know if they do anything in town, but it's not like a huge organization or anything. And then DSA, what kind of burnt me on them was they were like kind of hinting at like canvassing and stuff for the Democratic Party people here in town. And I was like, nah, I'm out. See ya. Like, so the Free Store, we don't have any political affiliations, obviously. We are very upfront that we're a mutual aid organization. And yeah, I don't think some people know what that means though. Like, it's weird. We have that we've had people come in with MAGA hats on, like using our service. And it's like, do you not see the contradictions, bro? Like, there's so many contradictions in your like ideology. But again, I think it's because they've never been exposed to anything else besides just capitalist propaganda their entire lives. So.
Yeah. And if someone were to walk in the Free Store and be like, what is this? Why is this here? How does it work? Like, how would you explain that to them?
I mean, as a community, pull our resources together and try to help each other as much as we can. We get a lot of donations. I think people feel better about donating to, like, we had a woman today drop off some stuff, and her exact words were, I don't want to give anything to Goodwill anymore because do you know how much their CEO makes? And I was like, yep.
Also,
like, you should also think about
up in like non-westernized countries, like where they dump like landfill materials, like gotcha. So much Goodwill stuff
so
over there.
Which is that, I mean, like, we haven't had that problem as much, but it's like there are going to be things that, I think there will come a point where it's like our space is, it's like there's a limited amount of space that we can't keep everything, but we try to, like, when someone donates stuff, because you never know what somebody needs. I mean, like, we have some lamps and stuff in here right now, some kitchen utensils, and then we have a ton of clothes. That's the biggest donation that we usually get, are clothes. And then we also try to have as much as possible, like Plan B, condoms, like feminine hygiene products, and then diapers. But most of that stuff gets gone. Like tampons and pads and diapers, like, go so fast. Like, that's, to be honest, that's what the bulk of our like budget goes to, or diapers, because it's just, I don't know, like, people need diapers and it's fucking hard, So there actually is I'll just throw this out here. We haven't contacted them yet, but there is an organization that's like a non-for-profit that helps people get diapers. They don't help individuals get diapers, but they help organizations get diapers. So we're currently going to try to contact them to see if we can get like a steady flow of diapers. I actually could probably, can you still hear me and still see me?
Yeah, I can still see you.
Okay, cool. It's called Baby to Baby. It's you have to I think you have to fill out some some stuff, but I don't think that they're definitely not a revolutionary organization, but they try to at least like provide diapers and stuff to like non-for-profits throughout the US. So that's kind of, and it sounds, another thing too is like we always talk about when people ask us like, what do you need, and it's like we really need money. Like if you can't give us money, like diapers and feminine hygiene products, because like those are the things that go. We usually try to have Narcan as well. We have a Eastern, I think I always call it Charm, but I don't think that's how it's like Chattanooga Harm Reduction is what it's called. So it's just like, I don't really know how to say what they do, but like they just drug stuff, like cleanly using drugs, and then also having Narcan if you're, if someone ODs. So we partner with them. They actually share our space with us and like keep some of their stuff in our space. So, yeah. So yeah.
Is that one of them there, like next to you? Is that what you were like looking at?
Oh yeah, we have a volunteer with us. Yeah, I have a volunteer with me. Are you heading out, Lynn?
Yeah, I'm gonna head out.
Okay, cool.
Did not prepare well or eat dinner before.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I'm sure I'll see you around. Yeah. So yeah, we share the space with Chattanooga Harm Reduction. They don't have a huge space, but I think it's like they have a key to our spot, and then they can if someone calls and is like, I need Narcan or whatever, I don't know, like that's not, again, that one's also not, that's actually part of our organization that I want to get involved with, so I can know, because that is an issue in Chattanooga. It's just fentanyl overdoses and shit like that. So, and then also we have, which we are working on, we have a community fridge organization in town that does, and they currently have two fridges. One is in Highland Park, which is slowly becoming gentrified area in Chattanooga, and then another one in Red Bank, which is like just north of Chattanooga. But we're gonna put one of their fridges here too, and like we'll build a shed outside for it to be, and then it's just a community fridge, like you drop off fruits and vegetables hopefully, and just whatever, like there'll be a pantry and then a refrigerator, and then we'll just the free store will just maintain it, clean it, try to put some fruits and vegetables in there. Me and my wife started gardening this year, so hopefully we'll have some excess shit to throw in there. But yeah, so that's, I think, I don't know, I don't really know why I got on that topic, but that's part of other organizations in Chattanooga that are a little more left leaning than your standard Democrat liberal person. So
yeah, thanks for giving that rundown, because I'm hoping that some of the folks who listen to this might be able to take a closer look into those orgs and figure out how to support them. And also if you want to connect me with any of your friends from the harm reduction folks, would be happy to have them on. So I used to, at one of the organizing roles that I played at one point, we advocated for and won a harm reduction program here in Haywood County where I live. And so I'm pretty familiar, but for folks that aren't, who might be listening, it's, the idea is basically harm reduction means reduce the harm that is caused by a behavior that's kind of unavoidable. And so the idea is if we know drug use is happening, and we know that shaming and criminalizing drug users is not actually stopping drug use, then how do we reduce the harm that is caused by drug use, both on an individual, but also a community level? So different harm reduction programs will look like different things, but Narcan distribution to help prevent overdoses, fentanyl testing strips to help test their supply, And then also like clean syringe exchange is sometimes
Yep.
part of it, where they will like provide drop sites so that folks can get rid of their biohazard materials, but also they'll provide clean syringes so that people aren't like reusing and risking infection.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, the person that does the one here in town is like, they've got it on lock for sure. Like they've really got it together. I think the biggest thing is just, again, funds are like, I feel like the biggest thing is like, how do you get money to buy these things? Because unfortunately in our system, you have to have that thing, money to buy things and get things. So
yeah, you mentioned y'all have a Patreon. What's your Patreon?
Well, I think it's Chatt Free Store. But we also have, I think the better route for us, and I can send all this information over to you post call. The better route, because we don't get pinged for pulling anything, because we're a non-for-profit. PayPal. Yeah. PayPal is like actually a better, we tend to try to get folks to do recurring monthly donations. Obviously anything is fucking greatly appreciated. But yeah, and then I guess to try to talk about stuff that if there's anyone else that is interested, I had a thought on the top of my head, and one of the things that the initial folks that started it, we actually canvassed the community and asked them what they needed, instead of making the assumption that they need things, and that's kind of where, I think some of these things are standard, right? Like diapers, feminine hygiene products, condoms, tampon, like whatever, like some of that stuff is like, yeah. But just, asking, we also try to get, when we can, if we can, like stuff for disabled folks. And so then like today, there was actually someone that came in and got I think it was used to help someone that's in a wheelchair get out of bed. I don't really know what it was, but luckily we had that. Some people reach out to us about stuff and we try to get our hands on it. But I think that that's one of the reasons why I got involved with the free store is I don't think that the folks that started it knew this, but that's essentially what the Black Panthers did, was like, they went out into their community and asked, like, what do y'all need? And I think that's kind of like, Mal has the same ideology. Like, that's what the party is supposed to do. It's not the party telling people what to do. It's the people telling the party what to do. And so that's why I was like, I really got to get involved with this organization. As far as fundraising goes, we haven't had great success, but it has done okay. Is we actually try to partner with businesses in town to get like monthly donations from them, and we just have a contract with them that says like, and some churches, we started talking to some churches too, but essentially like, we are our own entity. Your donations have no like sway on what we do as an organization. Just to have that contractual agreement that's there, so that they know, like, just because a bank's giving us money every month, that doesn't mean that we're going to start doing shit that you tell us to. Like, this is our organizational goals. But yeah, that's helped essentially. By doing that, it's helped us maintain the space. Like, we essentially can start covering rent through business donations, and then individual donations that we get as far as financially, we can use that stuff to buy supplies. And then we have, I was trying to think of like, if someone was interested in like trying to get something started in their own community, like we're in a more, the space that we're in is in an area that's a little bit more impoverished, I would say. Like, that's, so that we're in the area where the folks that need it the most are. We're not downtown next to the fucking $2,000 a month apartments or whatever. We're like literally like by Section 8 housing and stuff. So it's like, just because like that's where we need to be, right? Like, those are the people that we need to be in front of and organizing with, so.
Love it. That was so helpful. Thank you. And just like, you went from theory to praxis to your life's journey to Free Store. And this has just really been just enlightening. And like, I think a lot of folks will really appreciate hearing your personal experience and how you got here, and like, and how y'all are putting your money where your mouth is and your energy where your mouth is too, and your time.
Yeah, you're probably about to, if whoever listens, I'm probably about to get railed by some online leftists, but I'm like, whatever, man.
Me and Heather were already like, Chattanooga. We're gonna piss some people off. We're not even gonna look at the reviews because because we know we're gonna say some shit that people are not ready to hear. Yeah. So no worries. You fit in perfectly, and like we definitely want to have you back. I would love also to like get you and Zoo and some like other Free Store folks together, like on a group call. I feel like that'd be really fun. Because
like that's the thing too, is like I've actually, well, I don't know if you're still recording. Like there's been like one time where I had like like an online spat with somebody, and it was like people being like, they kind of were like, if you're taking money from organizations as a leftist organization, then that's not really like base or like praxis. And I was like, so essentially, like, just because we take cash, like we'll take financial donations from someone that that makes us quote unquote not based.
How do you think redistribution of
and so
the
like,
resources?
This person was like, though this one person was like going in on me, and I was like, all right, I'm about to look to see where you're fucking from. And so they're like some Portland fucking anarchist shit. And I was like, hey, look, I hear you. Like, I know you can get away with that shit up there, but like, come down here, dude, and start saying that shit and see how far it fucking gets you. Like, you can't just run around here being like, I mean, you can, but like, you go, like that's part of being at least for me, part of being a communist is like, I'm supposed to use the material conditions that I have access to make things better for those around me. And if that means taking some money from some fucking capitalists to try to help other people, then fuck yeah. And if you got a problem with it, then go do your own shit. Then like come down here and organize. And once I did that, they were like, hey, like I'm about to DM you. And they were like, yeah, I never really, like they were actually from like Richmond or some shit. Like they're like, I'm from the South. I'm like, bro, Richmond is not, you ain't from here. Like, and so, but nonetheless, I was just like, yeah. So but that to say, like, I don't know how other free stores have done things. I know how we have done things and where it has gotten us to this point now. And I think we have a lot, like this is just a start. Like we have so many ideas and stuff that we want to do with the space, like legitimately trying to start like fucking like an actual, like, I guess it's dual, I don't know what the anarchists call it, dual power systems or whatever, where there's like a system outside of the system. But like, one of my goals is to try to like get in touch with local farms and try to figure out like, how can we get your ugly fruit? Like, give us your ugly fucking whatever. Like, that's fine. Like the stuff that you don't sell to whoever, Publix or Kroger or wherever the fuck you sell your shit to, like, give it to us. Like if it's almost bad, give it to us. Like we can find people that will eat it like right now. And that's kind of one of my goals, is to actually try to have an infrastructure where we can get like fresh food for people. Because again, when you live in like poverty stricken areas, it's like a fucking food desert, and your closest place, like you might go to like a Dollar General and buy like chips and soda, and it's like, that's just because that's the only thing you can get your hands on. It's not like there's like fresh fruits and vegetables and things that are like kind of good for your body, like, and it's not that you're choosing not to eat that thing. It's literally the system. Like I saw a quote today that is literally a Lenin quote where he talked about how as capitalism develops, the food for the working class will get less and less nutritious, because you have to be able to maintain you have to make sure that your workers don't die, but you also have to maintain a profit. So it's like, if you can make the food more like a more shitty quality, then at least they're not starving, but they're not healthy. And I mean, also that could lead to like, if we have an obese proletariat that can't really, get around because we had shit food our whole lives, like that, you can't really start a revolution with people that, can't walk a mile. So
Yeah. And then there's the whole like psychological impact too of like if you're not feeding your body good food, then like you're not
nutrients and
able to
stuff.
think as well and
Yep.
like problem solve, and like you don't feel as courageous. So like
Right.
even if you did physically were able to join the revolution, like you're less likely to feel like, you know, the oomph to get there. But yeah, that's so I'm so excited to be able to like keep up with your work. Definitely want to have you back on so that we can see where y'all are soon. Or see where y'all end up. And Zoo with the Pulaski County store, they just started at the end of 2021. So they're pretty new too. And I think that like, it could be a thing where we're all learning from each other and like growing. So
well, lucky for us, one of the folks that started ours, that was one of the original three, they had worked at a free store in Huntsville where they were from, and so like they had a little bit of knowledge of like how to. They have a lot of. The anarchists call each other comrades. I don't know, but they have like other folks that they know that kind of help. Like they had a little bit of like they could spring ideas off of and be like, hey, how did y'all do this? And stuff. But and turning back to the like spat that I was talking about that I had on social media. Like that's what that turned into with that person was like, they were like, hey, you should check out these people and like what they did and like all these things. And I was like, cool. Like literally we can go, like, that's the point of it all, right? Like we don't have to, we can disagree on the politics of things. So things are so far away from legitimately having conversations on like how this socialist system is supposed to work that like, we should just put all that shit aside and put in like, try to be boots on the ground if you can. Again, I'm not trying to be like ableist, like, but if you got the energy to argue on fucking online, like Vouch or some shit, like you got time to do some, or however you say that fucker's name, like you got time to do some other shit, like in your community. I don't know. That's just how I feel about it personally.
There's no role too small. That's the like,
right.
It doesn't matter if it's a physical role. And
I can tell you this, if you got time to be on Instagram talking shit or Twitter talking shit, I mean, we had to run our own social media campaigns or social media platforms. So you're asking to come over and do that shit, you know, like there's tons of stuff. So
yeah, I have a role that I call the comfort captains, and those are the people who are just like responsible for checking in on those of us that are doing deeper work and just being like, yo, are you eating regularly? Like, are you being a human? And so people can do anything, but talking shit on social media is not a role. There's no role too small, but that's not even a role. So
well, that's my thing is like, I don't even care how quote unquote based you are. Like, I don't know. Like I know what my intentions are. So you can just like, you know, if you're scared of tankies because of the internet, like, I mean, I'm sorry, but like, I know what my intentions are. I know my intentions are good. And if we're ever to a point where there was an actual legitimate, like, Communist Party, Marxist Leninist Party. I mean, I guess there's PSL, but or whatever the fuck that shit's called. But like, I know what we should be doing. You know, like I know if you're coming in with ego and shit, then I'm gonna be like, I'm gonna call you out on that because that's my responsibility. Like, you know, like it shouldn't be personal interest and personal gain for why you're doing these things. At least that's how I feel about it. So. There's a long journey though. I know we talked about stuff, but I know why people are the way they are, especially Southerners and especially like people in Appalachia. Like you're secluded to an extent, you know, and it's like, if the only thing you're seeing is the propaganda that's on TV, whether that be CNN or Fox or whatever, I mean, Lord forbid, hopefully it's not Newsmax, or any of that shit. But, if that's the only thing you're seeing in like what the world is, you know, like you get fucking you get mind control essentially, you know, like you said, psyop shit, where it's like that's your worldview. But then they turn around and have, you know, like, I mean, what are revivals in churches? That's just the community coming together. You know, I don't know how you grew up. Like we have revivals all the time, and then you know, like people throw in what is that shit called? Like where they'll have like cakewalks and shit like that to help raise money for people. I can't think of what it's called off the top of my head, but I'm like, hell, y'all, y'all raised me this way. And so like, I just happened to find the theory about how politically we can do this for all of us. Like, and hopefully we don't have to worry about raising money for Julie who broke her leg or whatever, or the family that their dad died in a fucking like car crash or something. Like, it's like where the people can still be taken care of. I don't know. And then like growing up in the church too is like, I mean, all the shit that Jesus said, whether he was real or not, but I mean, like that shit's pretty based for the most part, but it seems like it just gets turned. Obviously it's gotten turned into like a right wing thing. You focus on the shit that's barely talked about in the Bible, homosexuality and all that other stuff, which is lost in translation. I think most people know that at this point. It's not talking about homosexuality, but instead of like the communal aspects of those things. So
yeah, Jesus was radical as fuck, and the police state came for him because
yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah.
So,
oh man, well thank you
there,
so
I was gonna ask before we go, like, is there like, just, you can obviously cut this part out, like, is there anything else that you wanted to ask that you didn't get to?
No, you honestly like touched on literally everything I was hoping to hear about, and you did it so well. And like, I think that folks are gonna be really curious now, both about like theory as well as like putting this stuff into practice. And I just like appreciate you so much. And I also want to be respectful of your time. I know that we're a little bit over an hour.
No, you're good. I'm saying for me, that's why I was asking if there's anything that you wanted to cover that we didn't, just tell me and we can dive into it. But if I'm good, I could talk to you for another 2 hours probably, because like this is the shit that's constantly in my head. But
yeah, well, like I said, man, we're definitely like, I want to have you back. Like we're gonna have so much shit to talk about, and so like, especially if there's like a subject that like you love, like I met someone on TikTok that I'm like what you were just saying about like, if it's about ego, like we're not here for it. Like this podcast for me and Heather was not about. That's a wrap on today's episode of Rednecks Rising, featuring our friends from the Chattanooga Free Store. Make sure to give them a follow across their social medias and support them energetically, emotionally, or financially, whatever is within your capacity. But before we wrap up for today, we definitely cannot forget about the answer to today's trivia question.
Hey Chelsea, so this week's question was for you to finish the sentence. Appalachia is known for being the blank capital of the world. The answer is salamander. We have more species of salamander here in Appalachia than anywhere else in the entire world. The crazy part is they can even grow up to 2 feet long.
That is absolutely wild. But as someone who has had the privilege of seeing a real live hellbender in person while I was creaking through Ledbetter up in Nantahala Gorge, I'm actually not that surprised, because that sucker was fucking huge. For all y'all listening out there, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of Rednecks Rising. Don't forget, you can head on over to our Ko-Fi page at ko-fi.com/rednecksrising to support the podcast. And I guess that wraps us up for today. So, Lord willing and the creek don't rise, we'll see y'all next week.